Hello, everyone. Good day. I'm Nicole Bucala, Senior Director of Business Development here at Zscaler, supporting our emerging technologies team. I'm very excited to have a session with everyone today talking about the latest partnership between Siemens and Zscaler. Joining me, I have Nathan Howe, VP of Emerging Technologies Strategy here at Zscaler, as well as Hannes Barth, Head of the Business Line for Industrial and Rugged Networks with Siemens Digital Industries. Both Nate and Hannes are speaking with us from Germany today. During this short video, what we'll do is we'll speak with you about the OTIT convergence and talk about why it matters now for CIOs and OT leaders. I'll be asking questions of Nate and Hannes around what the benefits are and what does it mean for the OT buyer or the IT buyer. We'll dive into some security implications of the convergence and talk about how zero trust is an important factor that helps modernize and transform OT environments, bringing them in line with the gold standard of compliance from the IT side. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you, Nicole.
Thanks, Nicole. Great to be here.
So, Hannes, let me direct the first question to you. What are some of the key drivers behind OT-IT convergence? Why now? And where are you seeing any barriers or constraints?
IT-OT convergence is a big word, if you will. And for sure, it comes with the whole digitalization that is developing since the past years with increasing speed. And the drivers for each individual industry, of course, are a bit different. But it's essentially two things. Customers want to get a bigger transparency on their assets, on their processes, and they want to prepare for what's next to really prepare for IIoT applications. But at the end, why they're doing this, they want to driving productivity. They want to analyze more and more data, put it through machine learning algorithms, connecting machines to drive productivity out of every step of this production. This is, of course, a strong value proposition for customers, but it comes with risks on the security side, as we all know. There have been applications, machines sitting in a corner, not connected to anything, and now they're suddenly connected. And this is why it's so important to think it really from the security side, how to make it secure, that you do not lose your productivity, you win with fighting security challenges on the other side.
And so, Hannes, tell me a little bit more. You know, I've been hearing that OT-IT convergence is coming for a while. I've been hearing of this term since 2016. It looks like this is finally a signal to the industry, this partnership, that OT-IT convergence really is coming and is here to stay. But why has it taken so long for it to come about?
I would say it has really taken so long, especially because of security concerns, which make it harder for customers to accept, and also to know that the industries we are in are conservative by nature. So if you have an error in the production process, if there is a loss of connection in the production process, maybe the whole production process fails. If you think of a chemical plant, the results are devastating. This is why they really go step by step to be very sure that it works. And to some degree, it was also the Corona pandemic, which helped us to realize that IT and OT convergence can happen. We were all now so used to work from home, like Nathan and I am doing as well. But the same is actually true for the blue-collar environment as well. Of course, if you work at a production line, you need to be on site. But there are many jobs supervising production, quality control, PCB programming, etc., which used to happen on site, which actually, as we and our customers found out, now are happening remotely.
Perfect, perfect. So Nate, you are a security expert. Let me ask you, how are you seeing the recent string of attacks in the industrial space and also digital transformation and digitization initiatives impacting the OT-IT convergence? What's that security angle from your perspective?
I think Hannes actually brings up a very good point in that we've dealt with the idea of OT being separate for a very long time, mainly because the implications of its technology is much, let's say, more world-changing than perhaps my email server going down for a while. But as those infrastructures have become more and more combined, the risks are becoming more and more prevalent, and obviously very wide ranging. And you can see that recently with a lot of information coming out of both the United States government and other governments, but specifically after the Biden, was it the Biden, pardon my terminology, but White House order, I think is the best I can say. I'm Australian, so I'm not sure about the exact terminology, but they're called about zero trust specifically around deployment in OT environments. And this is the first time we've seen any sort of governmental administration call out such a change. And so I think that in itself is an indication that it's no longer just Hannes and I talking about it. It's now getting the notification at the right levels. Well, not just the right levels, all levels. And all leaders in the IT industry need to be aware of that, because more and more of these OT infrastructures are being connected, whether it be in production lines that are critical to manufacturing or to people or to companies or governments, but also in places you wouldn't expect. And one that I really enjoyed a customer telling me about was their door opener. The thing that opens and closes the door as they go in and out of the building is technically OT, because it has a real world impact. Yes, they use a little scanner to let them in, but that door opening and closing is actually critical to their function. So that becomes more and more obvious as well. And I think so all IT leaders need to be aware of that. And the last piece I would actually say is, as we've become more and more connected, and again, Hannes brought this up before, the pandemic drove a new way of thinking, mainly because we needed to enable an entire workforce that was not previously or traditionally remotely focused. They were very much on premise working, having to do their PCB programming, whatever it might have been. Now we've had to enable that remotely, and that has been done in a lot of cases at a very quick, very short turnaround without the normal overview and review. So some of the checks and balances have been missed in that, and we are seeing the outcomes of this specifically at the end of last year, where a large number of state-sponsored attacks, and we saw this actually released by CISA in the United States, the top 20 attacks against remote infrastructure was against things like VPNs and remote access desktops and solutions like that was stood up arguably very quickly to enable people to work remotely when they were during the pandemic. So that idea of an expanded attack surface becomes a larger risk. And that's why these two need to come together, because you can't operate independently anymore. You have to find a unified way to get this kind of, for lack of a better phrasing, this thing or these things under control to protect the industry, protect the company, and in this case with OT, to protect people's lives.
Yeah, absolutely. One of my next questions, I think you just took the words out of my mouth, which are, what are 2 to 3 of the top benefits from a security perspective for this OT-IT convergence? You're such an expert on the IT side, and it sounds to me like, IT has been doing remote work securely for some period of time. And there's the opportunity to bring that over to the OT side. There's the opportunity to reduce the attack surface. Hannes, from your perspective, and specifically when you look at industrials, what are the top 2 to 3 security benefits that you see for your customers from leveraging kind of a converged approach?
To me, it's really combining proven IT mechanisms with what we have on the OT side. To me, it's undisputed that IT security has been evolving really for the past decades and has a very sophisticated array of weaponry against attacks, etc. However, applying the same weaponry against an OT environment will not work. There are other requirements like functional safety, like deterministics, like real-time connectivity, all these things which allow a plant to operate also in critical conditions. And you do not want to compromise on this. But this combination, technology-wise, is to me what really can make the difference. And then it's also about having the people working together. Traditionally, IT and OT were also handled by very different departments, which were following different policies. And now we see these two converging to one policy, however, still with different mechanisms on the IT and the OT side. And to me, this really makes a difference on looking at these threats holistically from IT to OT and making sure that you do not compromise on what OT needs to deliver and what IT needs to deliver.
Absolutely. So that prompts another question. Where do you both see, I'd like to hear from both of you, the collaboration between OT and security today? How is that working in some of the accounts? And where do you think that needs to get to in the next 2 to 3 years? Hannes, I'll let you respond first.
We see this varying across customers.
Okay.
But from a large chunk of customers, we have still rather separate organizations for the OT and the IT based on their requirements. And what I would envision that this comes a lot more to a collaborative approach, driving this different principles you have in OT, IT, but driving this jointly to secure operations and to secure the company overall.
Nate, anything you would want to add to that as to where you might see it going?
I completely agree where it is that we see this diversity between the two organizations. And I think it's because IT has been very often the kind of the rambunctious younger brother kind of doing what they wanted to do, whereas the OT organizations have a much more stable way of thinking about things. And I think that's important. But we do see, I will say, the convergence point at the moment, and it's because there is a needed requirement from both, is the idea of remote access, whether it be that an employee getting access to the IT infrastructure or the OT infrastructure, or it's a third party needing to get access. And they are the same requirements. Somebody on an untrusted network, the internet, needs to get in to do some sort of support or something to do their job. And that's the one place where I see convergence. And because of that, we are seeing more of the crossovers where the IT team is aware of the OT infrastructure or vice versa. We are seeing that there's some organizations are merging those things together and quite aggressively. The one thing I will say is it tends generally to be the merging tends to be either, as I said, the remote access piece or at the network level. We tend to see that kind of the companies that have an OT site and an IT site tend to merge in a network-centric location, like a hub location, and then they can route traffic either way. So that's where I see it now. But what I will say is, and this is obviously something to think about, is the necessity to differentiate not just the network, but the applications becomes really important when you say that, oh, I have an employee connected to the remote access, but I have an employee who needs very specific access to that OT platform. That needs to be considered as well. That granularity needs to come. So for me, VPN today and the merging of the networks, but in the future, I think the application path is where things are going to be more and more specific.
Got it. Got it. You started to touch on a couple of details there that are a bit more specific to Zero Trust. So with that, let me ask you to tell us more specifically about Zero Trust for the OT buyer. Why is that the place to start for OT IT convergence? And why is it so critical, in your opinion, to transform security on the OT side?
Yeah, and this is to me, I'm guessing, yes?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, the key thing with OT security, I think that everyone needs to think about this, is that individual applications need to be accessed very granularly. There's no need for all your third parties to have access to the same OT shop, including all the PCBs and so forth. And there are models around this to enable that control. Normally, we look at the thing like the Purdue model, which is a very common framework accepted by many in the industry, but it doesn't call out you need to have granular controls within the firewall. It should, but doesn't force it. And I think that's the differential when we start seeing the move towards Zero Trust. Now, Zero Trust is not a standard that you can go and buy off the shelf and install and have it work. It is the concept of understanding that granularity of, I only want that individual to get the access to the application. And if they don't have access to see any other applications, they shouldn't be able to see or even know it exists. So it's a very one-to-one relationship. And that's actually a huge benefit, not only from an operational enablement point of view. So I have a third party, he needs access to fix the machine that cuts the chocolates in half. Let's get him access directly to that and nothing else. Is as important as saying, I only want an employee to get access to the SAP ecosystem on this one specific application. So that granularity is very, very important. But that's kind of what I was alluding to before about the network side of things. And Hannes actually brought up at the very beginning the idea of understanding what one has, because a lot of the IT and OT infrastructure has been built out over years. And it's not to say that it's legacy, it's just that it's just grown, and perhaps there hasn't been the documentation, the knowledge that's been shared to be able to provide that granular control. So while Zero Trust is very much about the idea of a named authorized user getting to a named authorized application, the knowledge needs to be there to be able to establish that. The big difference between IT and OT is relatively restricted. It's a relatively small, let's say, landing zone for where you can actually, you do know what applications are within some extent. They may be a bit older, running on some older platforms, but you have a fairly good idea. Whereas IT tends to be the Wild West we tend to see with most of our customers. So what I'd say is that notion of bringing the knowledge, the inventory, is a huge step forward in these IT/OT mesh. But in doing so, not just having the knowledge, but leveraging that knowledge to be able to make decisions, informed decisions, that informed authorized user, to that authorized application. And you get to zero trust very quickly by doing that at an application level, not a network level. So that's where I see it going. I mean, obviously that does have implications on networks and other things as well. But I think at its basic level is authorize that user, validate them, and then get them access only to the applications that are allowed and nothing else. That's critical to the way in which we see the zero trust world, regardless of IoT or OT.
That's a really great detailed explanation. So Hannes, let me turn to you and ask you a little bit about your perspective on the better together value add between the partnership with Siemens and Zscaler, right? Siemens obviously has decided that zero trust is a good way to begin this OT/IT convergence, to begin improving security on the OT side. From your perspective, what are some of the key tenets of value that you hope your customers recognize out of this relationship?
To me, it's really that we hope and are pretty confident to convince our customers that this is the right path, because this is what they're searching. Our customers essentially want to have a simple solution that it's easy to maintain. They do not want to be expert in networking. They also do not want to be experts in zero trust. They want to be experts in their domain. And this is what we believe we can give by really combining the strengths of Zscaler of being routed in the internet world, being routed in the cloud security world, together with Siemens, who had this long tradition for OT, with brought generations of OT devices to the field, and also securing this, what I can call installed base, or what Nate called legacy. There's a huge asset pool out there which the companies have, which they want to transition from the current security paradigms to the future. And if I think of what we currently use a lot is perimeter-based security. And there is still a lot of room for this, because topics like safety, etc. You need certain requirements of the network you have to be provided. And combining this with zero trust is really what we believe is combining the best out of two worlds to allow the customers to reap for productivity and not to compromise on the security side.
Hannes, you mentioned a detail there that I think could be very interesting for some of our strategists who will be viewing this video, which is the element of safety in a plant, in a factory. Can you talk a little bit more about safety and how that impacts the choices of technologies that are used to create that OT network? And the reason I'm asking this is on the IT side, that's not often something that might be thought about as much. So we'd love to hear your perspective on how that comes to influence the decision around procurement of technologies.
Think, for example, of a welding shop where you might have a press. So there is a light curtain installed, which makes sure that if anyone crosses this light curtain in 0.4 milliseconds, production process will shut down. Now there are certification agencies who certify that you can do this in lower than X milliseconds. And this is why deterministic and safety are so important. And this is where directly transferring this to a zero trust environment, so routing this via an internet server, etc., will very likely not get approved. And this is why combining cell-based protection with OT security, with zero trust, for us seems such a good value proposition.
Interesting. So it sounds like a combination of defense in depth traditionally with zero trust. Having all these different approaches together is what's going to help modernize the OT environment over time. Well, gentlemen, we're coming to the end of our session here. Are there any final comments or questions you'd like to ask of one another?
I'll start, if you don't mind. Hannes, no, I think that the first thing is, I think one of the great things about our partnership has been obvious that we see the importance of protecting the OT infrastructure. And it's not just about whether it be a platform or a technology or a tool, but the idea of ensuring that those OT infrastructures are protected, not just in a network sense, but ensuring that we are giving that end control to, as you mentioned before, the people who want to protect the environment, but also enforce and enable the connectivity for the right people to the right solutions. So that makes a lot of sense from our point of view. My only comment, or more of a question, Hannes, is what comes next? When we've secured the OT shop floor, we've protected the remote access, what's the next thing that you see on the forefront?
To me, the shop floor seems so easy said, but actually we're talking a vast assortment of different industries and applications. So where we are starting will likely be discrete manufacturing, target automotive, etc. To me, expanding this already to the more process industries, like food and beverage, like oil and gas, is already a significant steps, because some security paradigms are even more difficult and different there. This is why, for me, this is already enough for the next few years if we jointly can conquer these fields.
I thoroughly agree. That's well said, and I look forward to learning more about these industries, because I think that's the one thing that has blown my mind as we've done more and more work together within Siemens, is just the sheer amount of differences there are. There's a lot of similarities too, but as you move industry to industry, the sheer amount of things you have to learn and adapt for is incredible. And I look forward to kind of learning more and building more with you.
That's great. And likewise. Well, Hannes and Nate, thanks again for taking time to talk with us about your vision for OT-IT convergence and the growth of OT security. Really appreciate all of your insights. And with that, we'll wish you a great day.
Thank you, Nicole.
Thanks, Nicole.